these are two fairly simple, straightforward episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, go first.
My personal opinions on this, I watched this like a couple months ago, right before the new season started, because I thought we were going to talk about it right away.
Yeah.
So if things are not fresh in my head, I'm sorry, but as far as this Doctor Who episode goes, I don't think it's that deep for whatever, but I have a lot of fun with this one.
We're talking about Unicorn and the Wasp, by the way. Just thought I should clarify that.
It'll also be in the title.
Oh no, I watched Midnight. I was thinking not exactly a fun episode, but
that'd be kind of funny if you actually did talk about Midnight while we were talking about Unicorn and Wasp. And you're like, it's so deep and personal and emotional and dark. And it's like, wait, what?
It's so terrifying. I'm like, I know, right? If you hate Wasp.
The scariest in the show's history.
I watched Unicorn and the Wasp back like when we were originally meant to talk about it. Edward's not here because he's decided once again that his friendship is ended with Doctor Who. Torchwood is his new best friend now.
I don't even know this guy. I've only been on a podcast with you.
We will bring him on for the next Torchwood video probably. But for now, Unicorn and the Wasp, like I watched a couple months back. I watched it again last night because I knew we were going to be talking about it again. And it's one of those really fun but disposable episodes. I'm not a fan of calling any episode of this show filler, but if any episode like met that description, this would probably be it.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying something's filler. It just means there's nothing it contains to other parts of the story. So if you want to skip it, if you're not like that hot on it, or there's no real like big character moments, it's fine. But I think it's kind of a fun episode, so I wouldn't skip it myself.
Yeah, it's good. It's clever. I don't know. I'm not someone who's really read any Agatha Christie, and I feel kind of bad about that because what I usually like to do when episodes that are about like creative historical figures is try and view the episode through the lens of like their style and the tropes that they tended to use. And I don't really have any basis for that here. Is there anyone here who's actually read any Agatha Christie novels?
I haven't actually read any of the books, but I have watched the Murder on the Orient Express movie from the 1970s, and that's about as far as my Agatha Christie experience goes. It's a good film.
So I watched this kind of concurrently with Vincent and the Doctor with the live tweeting, and it was interesting for me because I know a good bit about Van Gogh. I really admire him as an artist. I really love his work, but I know nothing really about Agatha Christie. I've never read any of her novels. I don't think I've ever seen any adaptation of any of her stuff, like Miss Marple and Murder on the Orient Express and Poirot and stuff like that. It's interesting because I know from the trivia of this that Russell T Davies and the writer
Gareth Roberts
basically just went out of their way to keep on making Agatha Christie references. Like they just shoved them as many as they can in the script, and it really shows because it's a very kind of camp, over the top kind of tribute to Christie more than it is an actual murder mystery in its own right, and trying to criticize it because, you know, technically it cheats on its reveal. It gives you a piece of information you had no way of knowing before the reveal to give it away. None of the clues or anything really matter because you couldn't have possibly solved it on the first watch.
Yeah, I feel like this episode could have been better. Like right now, it's kind of just a fun little disposable romp, but it could have been something like a Nikola Tesla episode for me if the actual whodunit angle was stronger. Because the big thing it's missing is that the mystery doesn't feel solid. And when we get to the end and the Doctor's like walking around and like we're wrapping up the case, I'm like, this doesn't feel like a satisfying like figuring out who committed the crime. It's just, you know, it's really blatant exposition. And like that's always what these are in mysteries. It's like expositing to find out who the criminal was. But there's something missing here where it's like I haven't really been feeling like this is a satisfactory like solving the mystery moment.
Yeah, it feels almost like a parody a little bit.
Yeah, it's very over the top.
The Shakespeare Code, which Gareth Roberts also wrote from the previous season, but pretty much had the same tone.
And Shakespeare Code was another one where I feel like it didn't really capture like that episode. My big complaint coming out of it was it felt like such a wasted opportunity to not feel like, structurally or thematically anything like a work of Shakespeare's.
I have more knowledge of Shakespeare than Christie, and I've read Shakespeare's, but basically, yeah, it feels more like a lampooning of Shakespeare and the myths about him and the legends of him rather than an actual send up to him. And this feels very similar as somebody who, again, I never read any Agatha Christie stuff, but it feels like it's a lampoon, if that makes sense. One thing about mysteries is that they tend to integrate even the red herrings into the narrative really seamlessly. So it doesn't feel like what you're exploring is a complete waste. The unicorn part of the Unicorn and the Wasp could have been cut from this story and you wouldn't have lost anything. It is so pointless.
What is the unicorn doing here?
It's just a red herring.
Yeah, this is one of those episodes that are just more fun. It's a scene episode, I would call it.
It's probably the most fun that David Tennant and Catherine Tate are having on the show. They are clearly having a ball in this episode, and their chemistry is so much because Tennant is such a charismatic actor. The two, I think I said before, the two people he really plays off really well with is Olivia Colman and Catherine Tate. And they're just wonderful together. They're a lot of fun. I think Don has some great lines here. I love the fact that they bring up the bees thing, which is like a recurring, because I haven't seen season 4. I just saw it, just went into this episode, and they reference it. I know it's a wasp on a bee, but they reference it, and it doesn't have a lot of bearing to the overall narrative of the whole bees thing. It's just a giant wasp in a series about bees. So, okay. That thing was kind of arbitrary in the series anyway, from what I remember.
Yeah, where it was like the bees disappearing and the planets disappearing, and it's like one of these things is a little bit more substantial than the other.
I do have a problem with the Series 4 arc. It seems like the stuff that's important gets mentioned in the first couple episodes, then gets ignored for the majority of it, I feel, and then gets brought back at the end.
Yeah.
It's not a brilliantly executed arc, as much as I really do like the series.
You're not wrong about that, especially because I think those mentions of it in the early episodes were pretty neat. And like they'd inform the conflict of the episode without feeling like forced in and like you have to be watching something else to get this episode. Like the way Fires of Pompeii did it was great, where it's like the series arc in the background is the reason that this plot is happening, but you can still just put on Fires of Pompeii and watch it as its own thing.
Same happened with Partners in Crime as well, because they stole the Adiposes planet.
Can't believe I forgot that this and Shakespeare Code were written by the same guy, because they do have so many of the same hallmarks. Like you mentioned, Daniel, it's so much of trying to capture the work of Christie or Shakespeare, like the tone and the aesthetic and like the style, but not really any kind of narrative elements.
Yeah.
And it's like it gets caught because I think when you're doing a historical episode, you have an opportunity to do like one of two things to make it like really great. You can do what Nikola Tesla and Vincent and the Doctor do, which is like make it a very personal thing about who this historical figure was as a human being and like their personal life. Or you could do what I think would be just as cool, which would be try to make it feel like a Doctor Who episode made by that person, if you can.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah. Like, I know no one can really capture the work of an author who's not that author, but if you have a Shakespeare Doctor Who episode or a Christie Doctor Who episode, I would say, what if this person wrote Doctor Who and then make that? And I think that would be something really experimental and interesting. But what we do instead is we're kind of not doing either one, because I notice this where in the Shakespeare Code, we bring up his son a couple of times and how that's like a source of like trauma for him, but it doesn't really feel like the episode is about that. We do the same thing here with Christie and her husband, who's cheating on her. Some token mentions, but it's not really anything to do with anything.
Yeah, again, Shakespeare Code to make a reference to his bisexuality, a very brief joke about it. But like that's what I mean. They're just throwing up random facts to throw in, and like this whole episode's framed around the night she disappeared. But again, like I said, it's so arbitrary to sum up. And it feels a little contrived how they managed to do this, that she goes missing because she fought a giant wasp who had her mind connected to... Yeah. That's why it happened.
The real big dumb plot thing here is the Firestone and like the telepathic connection between mother and son, fine, whatever. But the mother happens to be reading Christie's novel, completely alters the Wasp's worldview. I don't understand...
That didn't really bother me. It kind of made sense in a way. That's the first sort of view he gets of the planet, so he thinks that's how the world works. It works okay for me.
He did grow up like as a human, he spent his whole life believing he was a human. He gets this genetic memory. I guess this like other side of himself gets awakened, and it's like he's a brand new person. I like the idea.
It's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of thing, I think.
Yeah,
like
they really didn't define it as well as they could have.
Yeah.
I like the idea of someone gets fictional works beamed into their brain, and so they believe that's how the world works. And so they have their brain like printed over with mystery novel tropes, and so they kill people like a killer in a mystery novel because they think if you want to like be a part of the world, that's just how you do things. That's really interesting. The mechanics of how we make that happen is what feels really forced to me. It's like this rock connects the brains, and she happened to be reading the book. So on a certain birthday and something happens in the book, he gets angry for the first time, and that like unlocks genetic memories. Like, no, that's really stupid.
Yeah. Great scene, actually.
It's actually unintentionally funny, so it kind of goes with how over the top this episode is. So.
I don't think it was unintentional tone of the episode.
We've got one of our murder victims literally face planting into their soup, so I don't think the episode's trying to be too serious.
Well, that was really cliched, you know, but it is what it is.
Yeah. It's a very slapstick kind of episode. The whole thing about both the Shakespeare Code and this, I think they just kind of lack depth, and I think they're just trying to make, like I said, be a scene kind of episode. Hey, this scene's funny, this scene's funny, this scene's funny, but the thing that's connecting it all together, which is okay, because there are a lot of episodes where I just like, oh, the thing holding together the structure isn't very good. Like, for example, like Let's Kill Hitler, but that's way.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but there's so many scenes in that I still enjoy it, even though like it's not, the execution is not very good.
Gareth Edwards came up with a lot of set pieces and lines of dialogue that he wanted to fit into an episode, and then made the plot to fit those in.
Very disposable. Like, and you could complain about the fact that none outside of the mother, none of the characters are that well defined or anything. But at the same time, it's a huge cast and it's a small time, and that's not the focus of the episode. The focus is the Doctor and Donna find themselves in a Christie murder mystery and go all fanboyish and fangirlish and stuff like that. And they're having a blast just going through a Christie mystery, and that's the heart of it, really.
Poisoned, and that scene is great.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. That's probably the best. That's the best scene in the film, especially the charade scene. It's so funny. And I like the placement of it in the series because the next couple of episodes, until on at least a Christmas special, are pretty dark and serious. The Moth two-parters next. It's got some really creepy elements to it and some really tragic stuff with Donna and River Song. Midnight is, of course, bleak and terrifying. Same with and Turn Left is really depressing, and then we get into the finale, which is a little bit more fun, but also then it's really, really, really tragic.
Family, including children, get murdered in that finale, so I would say, it is very, very dark.
There's a lot of heavy stuff coming up next, and the same is true of Torchwood.
Yeah, so the fact that the placement of this episode feels very appropriate because it's the last like kind of fun hurrah we get with these characters until their stories take an extremely dark turn. For both the Doctor and Donna, because they both go through a lot in these episodes. I'm kind of glad we get one more hurrah with them being very fun. Also, Christopher Benjamin's in this, who played Jago from The Talons of Wang Chiang, and Jago and Lightfoot is kind of the famous Holmes, the two famous Holmes kind of double acts, and they have their own audio dramas and stuff, and they've teamed up with Tom Baker in Big Finish and stuff like that, so that's really cool.
He's been in the show 3 times. He was in Inferno first as well.
Oh, nice. But yeah, like I said,
he's not as very recognizable.
Like Jago and Lightfoot are obviously huge beloved fan favorites to the point where they have their own audio series where they travel with themselves, and sometimes they team up with Colin Baker and stuff. So that's really cool.
Need to listen to that.
Wow. It's really funny watching it straight after Vince and the Doctor, because they have the scene at the end where they show that a paperback book from the year 5 billion is being printed. I was like,
that's ridiculous.
What?
That's ridiculous.
That was the worst part of the episode for me, because it was just like, I get this is an Agatha Christie love fest, but no, that's not happening.
I love the fact that Donna's like, oh, she'll never know that her work is beloved and stuff like that. And it's like, the Doctor's just like, oh, I know you can't do anything. Then in Vincent and the Doctor, he literally brings him to present day Paris to show him how his work will be remembered. I just thought that contrast was hilarious. And like, her life was not as tragic as Vincent Van Gogh's was. So
we do, again, in terms of like not really making this personal story for her. We pay lip service to the idea that she doesn't believe that her own work is that great, which I'd have liked to expand on a little bit more, just because it makes her really interesting, sort of like counterpart for Donna, because that's her whole arc over the course of the season, is not believing that she has like any sort of significance, and she's really lacking in self-worth. To have like it's really neat that she has that conversation with Agatha, and it's like, no, you don't understand, your stuff is great. And then we don't really pay that off. It's unfortunate.
I like that she references the Runaway Bride. It's a nice moment of character building and continuity that connects. It's really well written, for considering the rest of the episode is kind of ridiculous and arbitrary.
They do pay it off, with even though the year 5 billion thing is ridiculous, it is sort of a payoff. It's a bit of a lazy payoff, but it is a payoff.
I mean like a payoff, because I don't know how else you do this, but like a payoff in the Vincent Van Gogh way of like getting the character to realize it, where it's like what you could have done is draw a little bit more emphasis to it in the climax. Like when we get to that bit at the river and she's like, my imagination brought you into this world, my imagination can take you out. Make that more of like she realizes the power of her own words, and that she's not just like writing useless nothings like she tries to like play it off as earlier.
I think it could be Gareth Roberts just sticking to his strengths, which is like comedy and some imagination, because that's pretty much all he writes. Like, Caretaker is probably the deepest episode that he wrote, and that was co-written by Stephen Moffat. I'm not criticizing him. I do actually like most of his episodes, but, I think that's because most of the time he just writes comedic episodes. He's the guy they used to bring in just to write the filler, not necessarily filler, but like the comedy episode of the series generally.
I remember you saying you didn't like The Caretaker, Nick. I liked it. I just didn't think it was amazing or anything.
The whole Capaldi era is so like ephemeral to me.
We're going to be talking about it soon enough, so we'll go through it together.
And by soon enough, we mean like this time next year.
Yeah, probably. But I have rewatched the 12th Doctor's era, and I don't know, it's holding up better and better as I watch it. But anyway.
Well, yeah, like you said, like he does the Craig episodes coming up, so like his stuff is very, like you said, it's very fluffy and inoffensive. Well, I think the second Craig episode is very offensive, but we'll get to that.
I don't know what's offensive.
But in tone and in spirit, his stuff tends to be rather light and comedic, and very much the Doctor finds himself in this silly scenario and tries to get out of it. When his name's on a script, I'm not expecting anything deep.
He makes nice little comical, disposable, usually before the deep stuff happens episodes.
Yeah, and I don't really have a problem with that, I think we're comparing this to like Vincent and the Doctor, and
I watched the episodes almost back to back. That was why my brain was making the comparisons.
Sometimes an episode's attempting to achieve something different. And that's fine. The Shakespeare Code, the Unicorn and the Wasp, they don't really go too deep into the deep when it comes to characterization. They're pretty fun. They are what they are. And they do have some interesting ideas. The Shakespeare Code more than this. I don't have too much negative to say.
You're right, Rob. I don't want to try and judge this as if it's trying to be something it's not. I think you can have an episode that's light and fluffy and comparatively inconsequential that still just has a stronger structure than this does.
Yeah.
And I think he's done that with the Craig episodes, where we can talk about the second one. There are definitely issues to be had with both of those, but like in both episodes, Craig has an arc from a beginning to an end. There's stuff that's set up and paid off, and it feels consistent in a way that this and Shakespeare Code don't necessarily feel. And like the ideas of those episodes, it feels like it's committing to, and those are still very much like light, fluffy, fun things.
I will say,
no problem.
Like I wouldn't say the comedy in The Lodger is a little stronger, and that's probably because Matt Smith and James Corden are surprisingly great together, but also because Matt Smith just it seems to be the episodes where the characters just kind of let loose and have fun. The actors seem to let loose and have fun, because this one's the same. But also, like Nick was saying, I think this is a weaker script than what he usually puts out. The structure is very flimsy, whereas the Craig one, it's very well structured. There's a character dynamic. He develops in a very natural way. I don't think this episode's like awful or anything. It's very watchable, but there's nothing about it, especially, again, like I said, the Doctor and Donna, but there's nothing about it that would really compel me to ever watch it again.
I honestly wish this show would do these kind of episodes maybe even more often, but with more not letting the light tone be an excuse for shoddy writing choices. this show did more often just like straight up comedy episodes. But you can still have a very thoroughly like well thought out, clever written comedy.
The only one I think that kind of went for straight light fun that I can think of recently would be like Arachnids in the UK, and that episode is terrible. So
I would say that was light or airy.
That episode had scenes with Graham where he was grieving over Grace and sort of having hallucinations of her. So there were some very serious parts in that. And I think the ending is also supposed to be serious. So it's sort of a mix of the two. Really.
Yeah.
I would actually, I know I might be the only one, but I would give another Chibnall written episode, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree.
Dinosaurs on a Spaceship sounds really grim in the final 15 minutes, though.
The way I describe Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is that it's a really, really goofy, light, fluffy comedy episode with a very not light villain. And so the villain is the contrast to everything else. And so like scenes with him are kind of dark and grim, but the rest of that episode has kind of that fun tone to it. And it doesn't feel too much like they're taking a lot of writing shortcuts or like this scene is just dumb in a bad way.
It's probably the best written episode as far as that kind of tone and that kind of story that they're trying to tell goes. Because even in the Craig episodes, like the story surrounding it is actually not that strong. Like the Cyberman and the thing that's upstairs.
I completely forgot. How bad is it that I forgot that that episode even had the Cyberman in it?
Yes, it's like you're just thrown in there, and they take in both episodes. The power of love saves the day. So,
in his first episode, the plot is very, very background. Yeah. Like the whole premise is just the doctor hanging out in this guy's house, and that is the A plot. The alien stuff is the B plot, and I kind of appreciate the episode for that.
Yeah,
the episode's kind of like that as well, but there's a little bit more because Cyberman, even though they could probably just use some generic villain.
Yeah.
The plot of Closing Time is actually okay. It only really goes downhill for me with the resolution, which is stupid. Like the Cyberman's
it's so bad.
I guess to keep his tradition of having every 12th episode of his series have a Cyberman in it.
Yeah.
Every 12th episode in his series has a Cyberman in it. Every single one.
That's
so
weird.
Yeah.
That is true, actually. Weird.
And even when the episode is depleted, every 12th episode has a Cyberman in it.
That's just weird little. I don't know if they did it on purpose or it's just.
I don't. It's just bizarre. Yeah, I think maybe he just caught it eventually and decided to just run with it.
Just keep this going.
If anyone notices. But yeah, no, I think we've covered all there is to cover about that episode.
Yeah,
although I will say again, just like I don't buy the unicorn being a red herring. Like that's the biggest thing for me. Is that half of the title of this episode has no reason to be here? I think most of us can assume that the unicorn, the thief, and the wasp, the murderer, are two separate individuals. And we know that the wasp is the murderer because we see the giant wasp shadow in the first scene. Like, there's no red herring being achieved by having this master thief in the background of the episode. And then we find out that it was Amelia Clark. And that's it. I don't know. I would have used the time that we spend on like unicorn stuff to develop the Wasp stuff and the rest of the cast further. I'm
aware that everyone has made fun of this, and I'm aware there is no real point in making fun of the special effects of Doctor Who, but it's really a good thing they did not keep that Wasp on screen that long.
It didn't look bad.
Christopher Eccleston era CG.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Like, compare this to the Slovene running down the hall.
I know. I taught it a Slovene.
For a giant alien wasp, if you can make me believe that it's in the room with the other characters for 30 seconds, that's really all you have to do, and they accomplished that well enough.
Hey, final thoughts.
It's fine. It's really funny. But, like, if you're looking for anything other than a laugh, I wouldn't go to this one.
Yeah, more or less. The same with me. It's just kind of a fun, disposable episode. There's not much depth. This writer's kind of like that all the time, but it's a fun little time.
It works more as a comedy than it does as an actual mystery because, again, the mystery, they cheat on how to solve the mystery, and most of the cast involved in the murder mystery are not really that interesting. So I think, again, like I said, it's mostly held on the strengths of how much fun the main cast are having and just being kind of self-aware of how silly it all is. Like, I don't think Agatha Christie is that well developed either. She feels very two-dimensional here, but again, it's in service of a rather silly kind of light piece of fluff, which is necessary in its placement because the series is about to get very dark until I think the next Doctor's next time. It's a little bit lighter than it has been, and even then it has some.
Oh yeah, that's another one of these. That episode's going to be interesting when we talk about that.
Yeah. Oh God, going into 2009 specials, that's going to be very, very disposable. But it's very inoffensive, and if you like the characters, I'd say it's worth checking out. I'd like to see it from the perspective of somebody who knows Agatha Christie more personally than we do.
I like it. Like, I think we've gone over why it's not the deepest story in the world, but it knows what it wants to be. It's pretty fun from start to finish. I think the cast are all really good, even if the characters are two-dimensional. Yeah, I think particularly David Tennant and Catherine Tate are clearly having a lot of fun with it. As Daniel says, it's perfectly placed in the series before it starts to get very serious. It's not one of my favorite episodes, but I don't have many complaints about it. I like it just fine.
Just as a quick aside, just because again, I'm watching DuckTales at the moment, and Catherine Tate and David Tennant. Catherine Tate actually plays one of the characters in it, and I'm really looking forward to two of them interacting. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh wait, what episode are you on? Because that has in fact happened.
I know. I figured it would because she's like one of the main villains. I'm just near the end of season 1.
The DuckTales reboot is so good. David Tennant is Scrooge, and Catherine Tate is Magic at the Spell, and they're both amazing, and everyone should watch that show.
I still need to check that out.
Season 3's coming in like a couple of weeks. It's going to be great.
Oh, awesome. I picked a perfect time to watch it then.